So as countries around the world continue to work on keeping the pandemic under control by managing their local infections and imported cases, there is now the concern over transmission risks through frozen food imports.
Well, last week, China said it would ban food imports from companies with coronavirus outbreaks in their production facilities or whose products were found to contain traces of the virus. While the situation is under control domestically, the country has seen sporadic outbreaks, mostly linked to workers dealing with cold chain imported food.
Global experts have long suspected the virus's ability to travel and be transmitted through cold chain products, but evidence has not been easy to nail down.
Well, let's bring in the Straits Times' China correspondent Elizabeth Law to share more. Now, Liz, WHO says it's highly unlikely that people can contract COVID-19 from food or food packaging. But what are the experts in China saying about the risk of infection from imported food?
Right. Hi, Yan and Ollie. So what we have seen here in China is that in the last 6 months or so, there have been quite a few of these sporadic infections, and most of them are linked to facilities that process imported cold chain foods, be it frozen foods, be it refrigerated foods. So there are two theories to it. One is that when there was that whole Sinfadi outbreak in Beijing, at the time, the top epidemiologist in this country, Dr. Wu Junyo, he had already said that it was believed that since the virus had been pretty much under control in most of the country, this was probably imported. But of course, at the time, evidence was quite scant. But it appears that in the 4 months or so ever since that, there have been more evidence that have shown up. We have seen similar outbreaks in mostly port cities like Qingdao, like Tianjin. And so there is increasing evidence that the virus can survive on the surfaces of packaged cold chain food. And this also ties in with what has been reported in Singapore, where Singaporean scientists have also tested the veracity of this.
All right. Elizabeth, is it practical and even viable for China to ban food imports, given that the world's food supply chain is so connected? And how would a ban on frozen food imports affect China's economy?
Well, China actually does import quite a lot of its foods, and you see things from places as far away as Ecuador, say bananas, or even avocados from places like New Zealand. So it's really very much interconnected. And the thing is that I think it is impractical to completely ban frozen and chilled foods, because so much of the world's food supply is now interconnected. China imports a lot of its food as well, even though it has a very big domestic production facility. But it imports things like salmon, it imports things like ice cream and Western products that may not be produced here. So really, scientists have said that it would be impractical to have a complete ban on chilled and refrigerated foods around the world. What Chinese customs has instead done is that it issued guidelines last week saying that detailing how importers should deal with chilled and refrigerated foods that are coming in, meaning that when you have containers that have been offloaded at the ports, you disinfect it, and that workers working with foods that have come in from outside the country, they would have to take protective measures.
Right. Well, Liz, where is China's attention currently in its fight against COVID-19? Is it, the frozen food imports, the imported cases?
Well, I would say that both of those are kind of interlinked, aren't they? They essentially deal with things coming in from the outside. So the situation here in China has largely been under control since, I would say, May. But we have seen sporadic outbreaks across the country. The most recent being in Xinjiang. There is an ongoing one at Tianjin as well, and these are of course linked to imported foods. But of course, at the same time, a lot of the cases, there are still new positive cases that are showing up every day, and these are imported cases from people returning to China from overseas. So clearly, as we all know, the borders here are still closed, and this is their way of trying to keep out imported infections. And of course, I think the next front will be on imported produce, which they are now trying to put a lid on.
Well, thank you so much, Liz, for coming on to the show. And of course, as always, do stay safe there.